So getting back to how Mouse ruined comics.
Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
Welcome. It is Wednesday. It is another episode of the Mattriarchy. I am, of course, your host, Matt Rhys, coming to you from beautiful Scottsbluff, Nebraska. I'm telling you guys, it is like paradise out there today. Here, anyway. I don't know where it is the rest of the world. I don't have to live there. But tonight, we are talking about my favorite Dinosaur comic. And, of course, we're talking about everyone else's, too. We all gave suggestions for them and did some reading and all the good things. Before we get into that, I'm going to introduce tonight's panel. We have Cartoonicus. Stay tuned. Right there. Over here, we have Twitless.
What's up?
And, of course, we have the Hutch himself.
Hello.
Coming to us from other places that aren't Nebraska. I'm the only Husker in presence today. So, although I'm pretty excited for next week, I will be traveling across our great state to visit some other Nebraskans, and it's a bit of a secret. So, I'm pretty happy about that, though. I'm looking forward to it. So, anyhow, tonight we're going to talk about. Now, I picked Turok. I actually cheated.
Yeah.
And sent over 2 books. I kind of meant to say, okay, I don't know. I kind of want to do both of these, but we can only do one if we want. But I never asked anybody.
Oh.
Well, one was a Turok Son of Stone comic from the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, and then the Turok Dinosaur Hunter from like 93.
I honestly feel like we should at least in some way cover both of them, because I have so many questions about how the time stream works in this universe.
Okay, first off, it doesn't, but I forgive you.
It doesn't.
I forgive you entirely because I got to read more Valiant, and I'm always that's good.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is I had just picked up some more Turok at my last trip to Lincoln. I did some quarter bin diving, and so I was like, I have to share one of these new ones that I just got because it was so great. I loved it.
Most people in our audience will probably only be familiar with Turok from the critically acclaimed video game series, Turok Dinosaur Hunter, especially the one for
introduction.
The Nintendo 64 game, which I think wasn't that like a follow-up from the creators of GoldenEye? Like, wasn't that like?
Yeah, I think so. I'll be wrong about that, but I do believe that's correct. Now, the interesting thing about that is, like, I know a lot of people's first introduction to Turok was that video game, but for me, my first introduction to Hutch's suggestion was the video game that I never played. Hutch wanted to had us read a section of Gone, the Japanese manga Gone, and I did not realize that was a comic.
I didn't know it was a video game.
I didn't know. Did you play that? Did you play Tekken and get like the secret character?
No, I didn't. Okay. I just had seen. I just seen the game advertised and stuff. So I didn't even like. I didn't even play the game. I just knew that it existed. And so when he's like, when Hutch is like talking about it, I was just like, what? What's this? I looked it up on the internet and I was like, huh, that's not just a video game. So yeah.
Okay, so are we talking about mine, or is that?
Well, I was introducing everybody's books.
Okay.
Broadly.
I did not read Turok. I missed that one in your discussion of what things to read. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You mean those two?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. So you'll just have to pretend.
Yeah, I'll have to.
We'll share some images. Apparently, I must have. I just want to correct. We have Escape Claude in the chat there. And so Wikipedia says that there is not a direct connection, I think, between GoldenEye and Turok. I think they were released the same year. So they were both. There is a connection in the sense they're both important first-person shooters.
Were. I feel like I remember Turok being one of the 3, originals that was included with the N64.
Dude, they were both released in 1997. So one was released by Rare, obviously that's GoldenEye, and Acclaim did Turok because of, which makes sense because Acclaim was the comic book. Yeah,
well, and I actually knew. Now that you say that, that makes sense because Rare used their engine that they developed for GoldenEye to make Perfect Dark.
That's true. Yeah,
and I knew that because my son, who is a comic junkie, a video game junkie. Like information, he goes back and researches old video games that he never played. So he'll be sitting at dinner and he'll just be like, "So I found this great thing out about this video game," and he'll just like talk about it. I was like, "Yeah, it's crazy."
Escape Claude says N64 only had 2 initial games at release: Mario and Pilot Wings. We got an N64 expert in the chat.
There we go. Thank you, Escape Claude.
But to Cartoonicus's point, GoldenEye might feel later because people kept playing it for years later. So that's
now Escape Claude, your icon, your little face there, he looks really familiar. Did you have a different name before? Have you been around or is that just a picture from something else that I've seen? Anyway, so okay, this is great. Oh, okay. It's a Hiroshi Paradox. Okay, there you go. I remember Turok being out when I was in elementary school and people still playing GoldenEye at sleepover through junior high. Well, being as I was like 20, screw you, pal. So,
yeesh. He didn't mean it.
It's okay. If Escape Claude wants to make me feel old, it's probably fair. You don't get gray in the beard for nothing else. But yeah. And also I did notice that Tankatron has joined us again. With a great
what a strange, who is that? He just keeps following our streams. This new person. None of us know
already.
Yeah, I know.
What are you doing?
Isn't there better things to do on a Wednesday?
Yeah. All right. So which one do we want to start with?
We always appreciate that. So that was Hutch's comic and my comic we talked about, and Twitless. What was your comic that you shared?
Right. I wanted to do a whole stream, which I partly think we should. But I wanted to do I wanted us to take a look at Dinosaurs for Hire, which is the most comic book that's ever comic booked.
I don't know if that's true.
I don't know. I think it's in the running for the most comic book.
We'll have to we'll discuss that in depth on tonight's show.
At least the most 90s comic book that's ever 90s.
It is very 90s. It's also very 90s, but it's also very 80s. So we're gonna have to weigh that one out there here too. And finally, Cartoonicus rounds out our parade of dinos with
the odd one out here.
You cheated.
Everyone's gonna laugh. Calvin and Hobbes.
Well, you say that, but then you also snuck in like Super Schooled in there. I saw that.
Yeah.
There was a couple of the Super School pages, but I appreciated that for the sheer sake of the homage. So anyway, so that'll be the ticket on all of that. That is our show. Who do we want to start with?
I think let's start with Gone. Gone's a good. We'll start with Gone. I think that's a good one.
Now, okay. So Hutch, tell us a little bit about how you came to discover Gone.
All right.
Yeah.
I actually got the book Gone on Safari, which was the American adaptation of it, where they flipped it over and you could read it the right way. And I'm sorry. I know it's an adaptation of a manga. It's but it's made for somebody like me who I don't buy manga.
If we translate things into English, we can translate things into Western.
This did not need any translation because it's a silent book, basically.
Right.
It's just artwork. It's amazing artwork. Sometimes it's hard for me to understand what's going on in a panel, but I'm still going, wow, it looks really amazing. But did you have the ability to share any of them?
I'm pulling stuff up here.
Okay,
give me a second. Yeah.
Sure. It's got I think 4 stories in the collection. The first one is probably the second best one in my opinion. Maybe it's the best one. I don't know. As an introduction to what it is, Gone is it looks like a Tyrannosaurus who's about the size of Yoshi. He's just this squat little dinosaur who walks on his hind legs, And actually, they say he's a Gigantosaurus, but whatever. He's not Giganto. He is a dwarf. He's a dwarf dinosaur.
Yeah.
And all he does in every book is keep walking forward and and menace other animals and do things to his own pleasure. That's all he does. So even though he's a little guy, everybody's afraid of him, and he starts out the one at the beginning of the book. He's just running into a tree to cause the fruit to fall so he can eat fruit, and he causes a bird's nest to fall onto his head and catch like on his horn so it can't go anywhere. So it's
and he's got tiny little hands, so he can't reach the top of his head, his giant head.
But he's even though he's like 2 feet tall, he has like he has Arale levels of strength. He's super strong. He's practically
It took me a little while to figure that out.
And he's practically indestructible. He's basically a kind of like Superman if Superman was a cranky little dinosaur in terms of like what his role is in some of the stories. He's a bully of other bullies essentially when he's not bullying people himself. So he's this very interesting force.
What?
I said, might I compare him to Kirby?
A bit. He's a little more, like I say, he's got the crankier side though, because he's hungry and
he can be cranky.
Jack Kirby?
No.
The video game character.
Pinky the Kirby.
Okay. I don't play that. Okay.
It's not. I wouldn't say it's too far, but the other side of it is that he is very much a cartoonish looking character that's put in a world that is drawn to be practically photorealistic that at the end of every chapter there's usually a couple of like, it's almost like a guidebook of like, here's what this animal is and here's its like, technical name. And so these books are actually
a very realistic drawing of it.
Yeah, very
to the cartoony way it might appear in the comic.
Yeah,
right.
Because they do, like, all the characters are drawn very realistically, but they still have cartoon expressions.
That is true. Yeah,
eye shape and mouth shape and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference between how Gon is portrayed, because Gon is like, it's so like there's this double effect of him being kind of a cartoon character in a more realistic world, but also being a dinosaur that doesn't fit in with his surroundings either. So it's a double impact there, and it's magical. It's great.
I think we call him Gon the Last Dinosaur. Like he's continued on past the dinosaurs dying out, and he's just hanging around with all these modern African, Asian animals. And,
he's just that tough.
Yeah,
he's too stubborn to die, or Grim Reaper was too intimidated to come collect.
He
survived the flood.
He reminds me of the character Injun Joe from the old Warner Brothers cartoons, where the mountains split apart and this guy's just slowly walking forward and walks through a tree and just keeps walking forward. Everybody runs in terror that he's arriving, and that's the sort of impression he gets. All these animals just try to get out of his way, and so this bird nest lands on his head, and these 3 birds are stuck there, and their mother tries to come down and rescue them, and it gets grabbed by a hyena and eaten.
This was a horrifying moment of it.
Yeah, they watch their mother get eaten, and they are stuck there in this nest.
And then almost immediately, it seems to follow it up with a joke.
Yeah.
It's walking this interesting line between nature documentary, which is that animals eat other animals, it's ugly out there, and then and then the cartoon. So tonally speaking, Gon is very interesting because it's walking that fine line. Animals, like I said, it is a wild world out there, and animals, it's a dog eat dog world, and then you've got this cartoon character to kind of balance that out, and often Gon's role is to either bully other bullies or to take the other pattern I think that I've seen a bit that happens. He's not always bullying other predators. There's a couple of them. There's like an old lion, and he gets that old lion to catch some antelope in one of them. And so he's often an advocate for like animals that are, they're past their prime. They're like, they've been left behind by the herd, disrespected. And Gon's gonna give them the business so they can make it to their next meal or
And
destination.
one of the great things in that first story with the birds is that the birds obviously can't fly. That's why they're stuck in the cage. And so then all of these things happen to Gon and the birds. They're chased, they're hunted, they're struck by lightning, the bird nest lights on fire, and so all of a sudden he accidentally teaches the birds to fly because they're trying to escape the fire.
Right.
And so then the birds finally take wing, and there's this triumphant scene where the birds are flying and Gon is
You're
walking.
jumping way ahead here.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Well,
I wanted to explain something.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry, but the what I like is that Gon does not care about them. Yeah, he's ignoring. He's either not even aware that they're there, or he doesn't care, or he couldn't do anything if he tried. And you see him, they're like dying of hunger and thirst, and he walks through a river and they almost drown, and they come up and each one has caught a little minnow, and he's caught a fish, and they're like, okay, we got something, and they're almost starving, and then there's just an attack from a whole bunch of locusts, and the whole nest is filled with locusts, and they got food for a while. And but what I like is that after several pages of them encountering other animals and Gon fights them off, so they're kind of safe, you see Gon emerge, and the birds have the same expression as Gon. Mm-hmm. They now have this stern look, this frightening look that menaces everybody. There's 3 little Gon birds on top of Gon as he's walking. And I love that they've kind of grown up and taken his attitude as their own. And then, yes, they get, I forget how they catch on fire. Do you remember?
It's a lightning strike.
Oh, it's a lightning strike, yeah. And this fire is burning from the back of the nest. And Gon begins running. And there's this hyena who has been trying to eat the birds numerous times. And all of a sudden, the hyena looks, and Gon is running at him. The nest is on fire. The birds are on fire. The dinosaurs are on fire. And they're running right at him. It's a hilarious scene. And yes, that does get the birds to finally flap and move on. And then they all take a dump on his head as they leave.
Which is a great moment. Okay, so the medal is saying it's Gone.
Of course it is.
Gone.
Is that correct? Am I reading you right? Let me know.
Go N.
Go and I don't know.
Go in. I gotta say Gone. I don't know. I've been saying that for ages.
Well, I mean, the thing is, if you say it Gone, it makes all of the titles of the English volumes hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
right,
Gone on Safari. Yeah. Gone in the Jungle. Yeah, I mean, so it's
the All Gone Zine.
I'm gonna skip the 2 other stories. They're interesting, but I didn't really care for them. The one where he's walking with all these other scarred, furious animals that have kind of joined him, and they run into a beaver and destroy his house, and he emerges singed and scarred and walking alongside them, and this is like how he gets his group together. And then there's one where he climbs a mountain. But what I really liked is this one that we see where he finds an old elephant, and he kind of leads the elephant along. Sometimes he's giving it the impetus to go forward when it doesn't want to move anymore, and it leads the elephant leads him through several things and teaches him and helps him. They kind of have this little companionship going, and the elephant ends up at the elephant graveyard, which is rendered in an amazing two-page shot, and you realize that that's where the elephant has been going all this time, is going off to the elephant graveyard to die, and so they both fall over into the bones. Gone. I don't know.
Just say Gone.
So the Gone begins rolling around and like making a bone angel. He's having fun like it's snow, and the elephant leans over and they both close their eyes. Gone because he's going to sleep, and the elephant because he's dying. And it brings a tear to my eye, and it did the first time I read it. It did when I was catching up with it before this show. So I love that story, and it's very different in ways from the others because he does kind of care about somebody else. But granted, this person helped, or this individual helps him, so he's helping the other one, kind of gives him some strength to go on and gives him some tugs when he needs it,
And that's like Gon is kind of and I actually did I'd read it before, the one where it's him and his posse basically, and they're all injured or otherwise scarred animals, and that's the other thing that, like, one theme that does often happen is that Gon's not like trying to be like a superhero, but he does kind of represent often predator or not predator. He is often on the side of the underdog in a way. So like he can be on the so those birds you were mentioning are kind of underdogs in a way because like of how easily prey they are. In this case, we have an old elephant who's the underdog because he's basically being abandoned by his herd, and there's no way for him to reach his final burial ground. And in the posse example, like all of those other animals, predator or otherwise, have essentially there's something about them that I think makes them less than what the prime versions of those animals would be. And so one thing I think we often see in the comic is how this literal dinosaur, which is, I think that there's this weird little, the layers of what's kind of going on here are very interesting because if you think about it from a adaptational micro evolutionary standpoint, Darwinian standpoint, the dinosaur would be the least adaptable, the least capable, because like they all went extinct, right? All of these other animals are technically more capable. And so there's another layer of that kind of that irony of the fact that it is in fact a dinosaur, this tiny little dinosaur that should not be alive, that is in fact being the thing that is helping these ostensibly far more advanced organisms get ahead with his indomitable spirit. And there's almost, I feel like there's almost a commentary on you could almost extend that to a commentary on humanity perhaps, but either way there's definitely some layers to this, or you could just enjoy just this really goofy looking dinosaur. There's different ways you can enjoy this one. They made an animated series out of this, and so some of the stories like that have there's a CGI animated series. So you remember the first story with him versus the bear?
No, I haven't seen that one.
It's just I think it's one of the first ones so they adapt some of the earlier stories, and I think the animals talk, but he doesn't. And so the animals are just like, we're being bullied by this thing. It's a very different experience than the comic. I think the comic is way better, but it's to bring it back home to why Gon has to be a dinosaur. Because they could have chosen any other animal, but I think the fact that they chose this cartoonishly strong Godzilla-looking dinosaur I think it specifically elevates this from what it otherwise would have been.
Does the metal hate the animated series or the actual?
No, he's talking about the cartoon. Yeah, the cartoons.
Oh, okay.
It's not that great.
It's actually be really interesting if the other animals talked, because one of the reasons I read a brief snippet of an interview while I was trying to find this comic. I read this brief snippet of an interview with a guy, and the artist whose name escapes me. But he said the reason that there are no sound effects, there are action lines where there are no sound effects and there are like no dialogue at all, was because he felt like manga should speak manga. you shouldn't need to rely on words if you're speaking in the language of manga. And I don't necessarily like agree with him on that, but I do think it's very interesting that he's thinking about manga and comics in the linguistic framework that we've talked about and that we've talked about on the show before, and how there is a linguistic nature to the way that art is being used, and so that's a fun intuition. on that.
So to answer Chicken's question, yes, it was Tekken is where Gon shows up, and he is he's like a cheat character because his height is so, as you can tell, his height is so low that like almost no attacks in the game will hit him because they all fly over his head. So you're restricted when you're fighting Gon to using only like crouching attacks. Meanwhile, Gon can use his full moveset.
Oh, that's hilarious.
He's actually, I think he's banned in tournaments. So you're not allowed to. I don't think he's tournament approved for the game.
I'm gonna get a T-shirt that says "I main Gon." Anyway, I probably not. No, well, the one of the stories that Hutch glazed over, I just wanted to catch one moment in it because it's so great. In Gon Climbs a Mountain.
Yeah.
There's the whole thing is he's this little dude is like with like access to no hands is climbing a mountain with just his teeth and his feet and doing like, grabbing onto a rock face with his nose and then like flipping around at 180s and then catching it with his toe clips and then flipping around again, which is really like a lot of crazy dynamism, isn't it? But one of the big characters in Gon is that he's just so cross. Like for most in everything, he's just scowling and he's uncomfortable, and he's just determined for most of the stories, most of the panels in this volume. But he's crawling up the thing. And he's getting up to the past the tree line. He's getting up into where there's the ice cap on top of this giant mountain, and he sees a cave in the middle of the snowstorm, and he goes in, and there's all these like snow leopards that are like snuzzled in together, and there's cross, and he's looking at them cross, and they're looking at him cross, and you think, is there going to be a fight? And then you turn the page, and he's like cuddled in with them. and the mom snow leopard comes in, and then it looks like it's going to be another thing, and then like everyone's like all cozied in, and they're having a thing there. So
that was the one part of it I liked. I knew when you said I got to point out this one part. I bet he talks about the snow leopard.
Oh,
Yes, you did.
That's a great moment. Yeah, well, and the whole rest of the thing, it's all like action. So there's not as much narrative in that story,
right.
Because it's all about the trials of making it up and then down the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So it's visually stunning, great vistas. It's not. It sounds like an insult. It's not great story wise. There's just not that much meat on that story's bone, except for that sequence.
Gon is very interesting because of there isn't a lot of story in terms of like character development or any textual development. It's very much like this very interesting twist on watching. I really do think, going back to the nature documentary thing, that really is applicable here. It is a sort of it's a kind of tongue-in-cheek comedic nature documentary. It's like, I'm going to take all this nature documentary stuff but I'm going to put a cartoon character to kind of walk you through it. And we're going to follow the adventures of this one plucky, completely out of place character so that we can explore some very real places and vistas, and then interact with some very real creatures. So like I said, it's an educational comic in a lot of ways. You can hand this to your kids and have them learn about interesting creatures that they wouldn't know, species they'd never heard of. But I will say that one thing that does sadden me is that when I was trying to look up, if you try to find Gon, it's not the easiest series to find. I think it's out of print. I don't think it is currently being printed. So I think if you try to find it, you're looking at used copies. And that's something that to me shocks me, because this thing should be in print.
Yeah. It's so crazy that it would be out of print, that it's not like one of those things that like is on every Scholastic book fair.
I know.
Like,
I'm
shocked.
Like
if imagine yourself a 9-year-old boy, how would you not like breakfast, lunch, and dinner? This is like comes all of your diet.
Yeah,
like that. I don't understand.
Yeah, Paradox Press did collect all the manga that existed up to that time, and this was like the 96 to 2000 they published their versions, and yeah, there should be a. Well, it says that they CMX reissued it, and then no, I guess that's like 2007 to 2009. They're still out of print. It's like there've been numerous printings, but yeah. So Paradox Press was how I got into them, and I only got the ones Gone on Safari, which was the last one, I guess. So I don't know if that's the best stories or if there's 7 other even better stories. I've never read the others. I only read that one. That's just all I got my hands on. So
yeah.
But I love it, and I really do appreciate your comments, because I think you kind of highlighted why those stories work so well and way better than I could. So who is next?
Who is next?
I think Taylor, I'd like to hear you present yours there. Yeah.
I'm sorry, who?
Cartoonicus.
Oh yeah, sure.
Who's this?
Sorry, I didn't mean to dead name you there.
Uh-oh.
Whoopsie daisy.
By the way, I can go back in and post and remove that. But anyhow,
we've that's not the first time we've doxed Cartoonicus.
I mean, your name's on your comic, so
Yeah, I guess it won't be the last either.
So also Takatron with an amazing fire take right there.
The art by JTC.
Jack T. Chick.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. All right. We Tankatron. We did a whole show on Jack Chick.
Yeah. 2 years ago, it was around Halloween.
It was one of our most contentious. I didn't think it would be. It was one of our most contentious shows. We got more, I think, pushback on Jack Chick than I think we've ever gotten before.
Yeah. I actually we may want to readdress Jack Chick again.
Is that like the most views you ever got, or no?
No. Our most viewed one was Twitless's cringe social media comics.
Okay.
We have had something like, I think, 300 views on that one. It's a lot.
Weird.
Well, then tonight should get some pretty good views.
I hope so.
Yeah.
All right, so hit us with.
Well, that's the opposite of his intention. I'll tell you that.
Was it his Dungeons and Dragons one?
Okay. Anyway,
yes.
So Cartoonicus.
All right, I've got a name the chart, which should pretty much just explain it all. I chose Calvin and Hobbes purely because of the artistic angle here.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Watterson had an extremely cartoony, very choppy, simplified art style. And then at times, whenever he just felt like it, he would just go. And it usually goes in this kind of thing where whatever's happening is very clearly part of Calvin's imagination. So makes for kind of an interesting back and forth where he was able to launch us into the dream world. And in the dream world, you can have detailed images of F-14s and dinosaurs and superheroes or whatever else he might be trying to portray. And then we get yanked back into the cartoon world for whatever joke they're going to use at the end.
I do know that Watterson had to fight at certain points for the landscape that he was taking on the page, because
yes, I remember you talking about that.
Back in the day, the Sunday Funnies, space was at a premium, and so certain strips, it was definitely a privilege, not a right, to command more space on that Sunday page. And Watterson, I think, had to kind of really fight for, because again, in order to have some of these scenes, he really needed to take up some space, because for comic strips, because the panels are so small, and when you see them in the newsprint, they're tiny, and so the detail, like that herd of Triceratops he's got there, in a much smaller panel, he probably wouldn't be able to reproduce that. So some of these pages were specifically meant to be, like I said, for the Sunday pages, where he was allowed to kind of expand a bit and deliver some very fantastical
and go full color.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it wasn't always like that. Allow me to explain. This, I'm pretty sure, is a fairly early on comic that involves a dinosaur, right? That's not the image we just saw of a Tyrannosaurus flying an F-15, right? Let's, oops, sorry. Now, you'll notice again, the idea is we go into Calvin's imagination. He sees himself as a dinosaur. This is one of my personal favorites, actually. I just find the ending really funny, mainly because of the dialogue. But again, you'll notice the difference in how he is drawing this dinosaur. I'm pretty sure it's entirely off just imagination, without any real technical understanding of the anatomy or anything. He understands the rough idea of what a Tyrannosaurus should probably look like.
It looks like a Turok dinosaur, where you're just like, that's
Yeah. But also, in many ways, especially in that last panel, it's almost really with the same level of art style as the rest of the comic. We're not seeing the same kind of thing you're going to see later on, where he starts going back and forth between two very different types of imagery. He's starting to get a little more detailed here, right? But if, like, you notice, the guy's shoes here, I can't get my mouse to work for some reason. Wow, it's jumping all over the place. That's clearly classic Calvin and Hobbes shoes we're seeing there, classic backgrounds and stuff. Again, Calvin seeing himself as the dinosaur, ready to release havoc all over the entire world, right? Then we start seeing some more detail come up here, right? And this is what you're going to notice, is that over time, he got better and better, started figuring things out. I don't know if, as he was fighting for that space and getting more popular, they were giving him more leeway, and thus he was also spurred to push even farther and to make his art something more. We know he was, a painter, right? Was it?
I know he does paint.
He did a lot of different stuff, right?
Yeah.
He's a very creative, very artistic guy. And so I think what we're seeing here is a lot of other ideas that he likes outside of Calvin and Hobbes trying to make their way into the comics. You'll notice there's a very common joke, and that is we see dinosaurs running wild, doing their thing. Calvin's parents or somebody gets, angry at him, and then the last panel kind of just reverts the idea of what the dinosaur is doing. Right? You see,
I don't remember that one. That is, I love that. I love that last panel. Payoff.
I mean, this is practically the same joke here, right? With different scenarios, right?
He does. He does. One thing I do. I like that he evolves the jokes over, because like the first few times it's like he's doing a very like standard pattern with it.
Right.
But as he goes on later, he starts to kind of like tweak on the joke, which I appreciate a great deal.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate what you're pointing out, that he's evolving the style at the same time, but he's also evolving the humor. So like what the joke he decides to actually make when he cuts back or whatever is, he starts to vary that up a little bit, which I like.
Notice he's actually digging into different kinds of dinosaurs here and trying to get them more accurate. He's using the I'll never be able to say it. Quetzalcoatlus. The original word wasn't hard enough. They had to add Latin to it. Right.
Quetzalcoatlus.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
This, we're really starting to see details of perspective outside of just the anatomy. Really appreciating, but again, still the same joke. Basically, last couple of panels, something interrupts it, and then next thing we know, the big scary dinosaur is real in trouble. All right. I don't know if I should be letting you guys read through the whole thing here, but how did the fearsome Tyrannosaurus become extinct? Now we know, Mom. Right. Then he just started getting creative. Like, I'm just going to let you sit and take a look at this whole thing for a few seconds. the antics he's pulling, the ideas he's coming up with. Let's have
That's what I'm saying. Like he
just turn into a dinosaur.
he changes the joke here, which is
Right.
not just like, oh look, I'm running away. This is it's there's actually even
Notice he also did an entire strip with absolutely no dialogue.
right. And it's less of a joke about ha ha ha, like, oh, how'd the dinosaur go extinct, but it's more of a kind of just a celebration of imagination, essentially.
Yeah. Which is where the next couple of these I wanted to go with.
Every kid has had a day like that at school. Every kid has had a day like that,
This one only has one panel of dinosaurs, but I wanted to include it because look how like the entire thing is first person and how much he's able to convey even with just one panel. You know everything you need to know about this scene and what he's picturing with just the claws of the animal. That's impressive.
Yep.
This is probably my favorite because he goes after Susie, the prey, as it were, ends up getting mad and chasing him off. And so his result is to throw away his book on dinosaurs. Stupid science.
And again, he's making similar jokes, but like I said, I do think the tweaks he's putting on them, actually, I think this is actually funnier than some of the ones even with text, because you're just relying on
no
the
image.
bottom.
I mean, no dialogue.
Well, if you think about the composition here, this is actually really genius because the joke is part of the Z path, right? Your Z path leads your eyes directly to, and then he colored those eyes red, right? So your eyes gravitate towards those red eyes, but then you go, wait, those red eyes are like him going, whoopsie daisy. And so the natural Z path of your reading plus the coloring magnetize you towards the joke. So structurally speaking, that is that's a craftsman who is mastering the craft of visual gag storytelling and knows
also
exactly what
notice
to do.
Framing here,
your eyes.
He doesn't always draw the entire dinosaur up at the top. We've got just enough to let you know that's a Tyrannosaur.
Mm-hmm.
Up at the top right hand corner, you're only seeing half the jaw, right? And that's the most important part. It's jutting out at you. We've got these angles as the fight ensues. Like he's really thinking about this in terms of the presentation of a scene, not just drawing dinosaurs. And then one day he decided feeling cute might just become ridiculously impressive out of DK. Yeah,
This is a pretty legendary image.
This is insane.
Yeah.
And the details he's actually putting even in the background. Notice that there are some pterodons in the background of the first panel, which are kind of a, I don't know if you want to consider that a foreshadowing of the fact that these literal raptors are going to be coming in.
Oh, that's good.
Right. He's got the kill marks of a couple of sorry, what are they called? Triceratops on the jet, right? Really creative little details like that. The fact that he puts goggles randomly on the Tyrannosaur. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
And I wasn't going to include any black and white ones because I really wanted to focus on the quality of the artwork until I remembered there were a couple of story arcs that
this is probably my favorite story. One of my favorite story arcs in all of Calvin and Hobbes, the time travel.
I had totally forgotten, but they actually had a significant, basically, if we look at what we've got here, it's just they went back in time, with a box as their time machine, because that's what Calvin Hobbes did. And they find themselves up against dinosaurs. They're running from dinosaurs. They're jumping in the time machine. They're going back and forth. They find themselves on the run again. They're constantly, have these silly antics of like, take this one here. He's smiling, and Calvin has no idea. The next thing they know, they're on the run again. And this whole arc, I am sure, in both the writing and the art, had a major effect on a certain arc that Twitless and I did of Super School.
No, Calvin and Hobbes has no influence on my comic book writing.
Same concept. We've got a fairly I didn't do that great a job, but I was trying to go for a realistic drawing of the dinosaurs. We've got the same concept with them being on the run and trying to jump back into the time machine and going back and forth. Our version, of course, had the twist of the dinosaur ending up time traveling himself. And absolutely no way did I completely steal a certain panel straight out of a Calvin and Hobbes comic at one point. No,
You're
sirree.
betraying our secrets. I love Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah.
By the way, I did want to go back to Escape Claude had a comment I did want to address. I occasionally just Google Bill Watterson and just to see what he's up to. And he has been in fairly in seclusion, but just last year he came out with a new project. And I do want to
heard that was happening, but I cannot remember if I ever looked into what it was.
I do want to share just very quickly, not just to show you just how different what he's doing is. But it's called The Mysteries. If you want to share my screen for just a second. And it's completely divorced from anything, it's a completely different project. And I think it's called a fable for adults or something. I don't know if that's tongue in cheek or what have you, but he is completely, and he's working with a collaborator on this one, but he is still doing stuff. But he doesn't do a lot. And he probably doesn't have to because
people are still buying Calvin Hobbes books, and why wouldn't they?
Right? Yeah, I can't. Why not?
It's the best Pogo ripoff, bar none.
Oh gosh,
It's really amazing.
Bone was
a
the
mere
best.
5 years of work.
I think is Calvin
a
Hobbes better
legacy.
than Bone? I mean,
No,
Bone is
well-
amazing, but
Calvin Hobbes is better than Bone. I'm sorry.
yeah, Calvin Hobbes is.
It's close. It's
I think
close.
it's apples and oranges whether you want comedy or adventure.
No, they've both got tons of both. I mean, like I
do,
do.
but-
It is,
but-
they are apples and oranges in terms.
Calvin
of
Hobbes
format.
doesn't do drama.
If you ask
Um,
me,
I know you're going to talk about like 2 strips at one point.
if you say that I
Well,
can only
an
have
intrinsic-
one,
There's an intrinsic dramatic element behind Calvin Hobbes because you're dealing with innocence and development and growth and lost childhood and all that other kind of pregnant stuff that's in there. It's just the meta narrative is dramatic. The individual stories aren't.
if I had to go with one, it's going to be Calvin and Hobbes.
And why would you go with one?
I'm just saying if I had to.
I have both of them right there. You can't see it.
And it doesn't
You have
matter.
the
'Cause we all know
hardcovers?
Titless is still going to
No.
go with Pogo in the
Mm.
end.
No, I've got the giant.
Oh, that's really
Bone.
good. I don't know. I don't know if I could pick between Calvin and Hobbes and Pogo. I don't think I could pick. It might still be Calvin and Hobbes just by like the slimmest of margins.
Mhm.
But anyway, so yeah, no, that is I think a fair pick. Calvin and Hobbes not typically thought of as a dinosaur comic, except for the fact that it did plenty of little dinosaurs comics in it.
Right.
Is this the one you have, by the way?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
that's the Bone I've got.
Yeah.
It's super hard to read. Like, there's no curling up in the comfy chair to read that. That's like at the table.
Yeah,
It's
it's
so big.
Yeah, it's a tome.
I wiped half of the silver signature off of the front of it and reading it. I'd never read it before I got it, so I still had to read it. But yeah.
We borrowed it piecemeal from the library, and then we were just like, okay, this has to live with us all the time.
I think honestly, the best way to read it is in smaller installments. It reads better.
It was
that way.
we part of why we purchased it is we were able to get it at a really good price, and we wouldn't have been able to afford the individual volumes.
No, I agree. I have the tome. I just when I going back and reading it, I'm like, I think it's actually better to.
It is.
Is yours in color
better
or
in
black
the
and white?
original, in the original trade format. The
I-
other
I'm
one
more
is it got really
black and
hard to
white.
find the black and whites, and dude, the black and white is so much better experience than the color.
I kind
I'm
of.
sorry,
all
all
I
you
can
little
say is the
scholastic
very
kids out
first one I
there.
ever read was in color, and I kind of got hooked. There was a lot of information.
That's fair.
we were able to
That's
get
fair.
across.
I'm just saying.
Well, and the colorists who worked on it are all top notch. I'm not trying to dissuade from it. It's just that once you've read it in black and white, it's just like, man, I don't know.
I agree. I agree. Well, I think it's because his original intention was black and white, and so there's just embroiled into the way he's portraying things. It's just
Well, and I mean, part of it for me is probably that I start my introduction to comics as a genre were the funny in the paper. So
Mhm,
the
yeah.
idea that like that black and white experience is just part of my like internal thinking about stuff. So
Tangatron says, "I can't believe BC hasn't been mentioned with the Dino talk." I mean, like, we're only picking like ones that are favorites to bring to the table. We could go all night talking about
other Dino
Oh,
properties.
I was saying
Yeah,
before the
yeah.
stream that we have my favorite dinosaur comic, and somehow we didn't end up with Ninja Dinosaur, Devil Dinosaur, anything Jurassic Park, anything Batman. If you think
Well,
about
that's why
it.
this show. Well, we didn't do. There's a lot of dinosaur comics out there.
Yeah.
We could do.
And BC is an amazing property, but for me, I'm kind of like I can't decide if I prefer BC or Wizard of Id.
Wizard of Id. Mhm.
Yeah, I love them both so much.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Before
guy.
we move on, I have to mention a single little panel that I saw on Facebook. We're talking about dinosaur comics. There's Batman on Dinosaur Island, and Green Lantern comes down to talk to him, and he says, "I don't think of you like going after dinosaurs." And Batman says, "I love dinosaurs." He says, "Batman loves dinosaurs." He says, "I
Oh,
have
yeah, I
a
saw that.
robot
That's right.
dinosaur in my cave.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love dinosaurs."
You've been there. You've seen my.
My giant T-Rex I've got in the cave. Good point. I will
That's
say,
amazing.
speaking of
I love
comics, like
dinosaurs.
we'll do a special mention to things like The Far Side by Gary Larson,
Of course,
and
yeah.
Dinosaurs comics that he did.
Well, and like our thumbnail,
Oh right, yeah.
was Dinosaur Comics by Ryan North, and for those of you who don't know, Ryan North is the guy who ruined Squirrel Girl, but in addition to that, like his dinosaur comics are ridiculous, and barely dinosaurs at all, but it's they're they're not bad. They're pretty fun.
So what this shows
Not my
us,
favorite, but
what
I
this shows
stole it
us,
for the collage.
and the reason that it was always going to be hard to do this night, actually, looking back on it, is that dinosaurs are not a genre.
Mm-hmm,
It's an element that, much like superheroes, actually,
well, so was robots.
can kind of be fit into almost any genre.
I know, but we can still say this is my favorite comic about dinosaurs. That's
Yeah.
not too. That's not
Yeah.
too.
It's just like we
War comics.
Uh-huh.
War
Yeah.
Time Forgot. There
Yeah.
you go.
More the time
I didn't even think about this one.
Task Force
Well,
X.
for my sake,
Dinosaurs every other
for
issue.
my sake, Hutch, I'm really glad you picked Gone because I was not familiar. I got to dig into a part of comic history that I did not know about. So that was
Honestly,
fun for me.
Having read this collection of War That Time Forgot, it's like some of them are fun, but well, man, some of them are best remembered, not read.
What was it?
Okay.
What was it
And
that like?
There's a reason they were forgotten.
There was
Well,
a,
it's just that Kanigher has a
What
way of
comics
like
that time forgot?
he hits on a word or a phrase and he uses it over and over again because he's talking to little kids. And so there was one called Dinosaur D-Day where these ships arrive with landing craft and the landing fronts go down and dinosaurs come out and the dinosaurs rampage across the island and and like every other panel it says it's Dinosaur D-Day and it's like what were these dinosaurs doing on these things as they floated around on the ocean waiting for them to be released? It's like it's just because he came up with the image and this is what he wants to do. And
yeah,
it
okay.
makes no sense,
So here's the thing about that. Kanigher's like regular war stuff.
yeah.
It's some of the best that has ever existed.
And I'm not bashing him. He's a great. He's a
know.
comic great, but
He's
got
a freaking legend. But that's
Yeah.
it's just like so. This guy, they're like, okay, we need dinos. They're really hot this year. Okay, here we go.
yeah.
Like, you know, I killed Nazis with my bare hands, right? Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
We need dinos.
Well,
Was
speaking
this by any
of
chance around
of-
1996, or was it 3?
No, it was the fifth. Kanigher was
no,
early.
Kanigher, we're talking like a World War with
Yeah, this
No,
is-
no, I'm
Yeah,
saying was it
40s, yeah,
published
50s.
around the time that Jurassic Park came out?
No.
No.
Okay.
So speaking of so old war comics, that's a great transition to start talking about the first issue of Turok, Son of Stone. I think that's a perfect segue into that.
Alrighty.
Look at
Great.
that. Here, let me. I've got. I'll present my. I've got it all loaded up on the other.
Oh, another one I just thought of, Twitless. I'm surprised you didn't. You also didn't go for Dinotopia.
That's not really a comic.
Still
It's an
sequential
illustrated.
art.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's more like just like an illustrated novel.
When is
I don't-
what
it's
era is
gorgeous,
this
though.
from? Oh wow.
Yeah.
Is-
This one
okay.
here. It's Let's take a look at the. If I've got the publication date. 76. 76.
Okay.
So, and we'll zoom out so we can get.
But
the
this is a later issue of Turok. Turok ran
Yeah.
for like 100 issues, so like it's
Yeah, this
it's-
is issue 61, I think.
This was odd because it didn't feel like Turok was actually the main character.
Well, no, it's all about the setting with this particular with Son of Stone, and so the framing is that Turok in the original Son of Stone stories was a pre-Columbian Indian, and him and his buddy, oh my goodness, I forgot his name.
Anadar, right?
Anthro.
Andrew?
Anthro or something.
Andar.
Andar. Basically, they're out hunting and they follow a critter into a cave, and this cave leads them to the Lost Lands, where like all sorts of stuff that shouldn't be is right. It's just like some sort of like land of time forgot kind of thing.
Hollow Earth.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's dinosaurs from all different periods. There's extinct animals. There's living animals. They've got elephants. They've got whatever. It's
Are
got
there
some
slee
sort of
stacks?
what?
Are there slee stacks?
Slee stacks? No, there are no slee stacks.
Oh, okay.
Cavemen. There's cave people.
There are cave people and there are other people too. And so you've got this Indian brave and then this younger man who's like who's Turok is mentoring, and they just go around having all these different adventures, fighting honkers, which are what they call dinos.
Ridiculous.
Different kinds, and there are different kinds of some are real dinosaurs, some are just monsters. But there are a whole bunch of things. Oh, look, it's the Hulk.
Yeah.
Yes, that was funny.
Hostess Payad.
He's
Turok
started-
started in 1956, so it definitely has an older history. And I think it's fascinating because for those who are interested in things like, diversity, for example, Turok is a very interesting example of that because we have it's the two leads are just these Native American characters. There's no, there's not like this token, we have to put a white person there or put a black. It's literally just and there's something very authentic, I guess, about it because of that. And that's part that goes into the honker thing because they wanted to, as much as possible, portray the Native Americans wouldn't call these dinosaurs. That's not a concept in their minds.
Mhm.
They don't even have really they had to come up with their own words for like horse and lots of other things that would be outside the tribe. So
Is there a reason that they came up with honker though? Is there something that
So
it's the noise that they
noting-
make.
no, it's the fact when you would have like the dinosaur maybe make the it's the noise they make, right? And
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not putting those two together. It doesn't sound like a honk to me.
It's just that, nowadays we always think of dinosaurs as roaring, but so many biologists now say that they would honk or tweet.
Well, this is
It'd
back
be
then,
more like-
though.
Yeah,
There's-
yeah, but why
yes.
would they be calling that? That's what I'm saying is they weren't saying that in the 60s and 70s, so it's kind of odd that they went with that because it turned out being accurate. So, or at least as far as we know, it's accurate.
So in this comic there are two stories, and in the first story there is a ferry way across a river that Turok and Andar want to cross, and there is one of the locals who has trained was food trained this water dinosaur, and forgive me, I don't know my dino names, to
Well, they
to,
might be making him up in this case.
this one
you know,
looks
they
kind
might
of
make it up.
this one looks a bit like a Chronosaurus, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, and to attack others, and he's food trained him, right? So he could names him Crawl because that's the noise this dinosaur makes. It's like, ah! So Crawl listens to me, he doesn't listen to you, and so eventually, so he's basically charging people to get across the river, and if they don't, then he'll send Crawl after them, and they've got to run away, right?
Is that what was happening? I thought he was trying to keep them from like desecrating something he considered sacred.
I thought it was.
No, the guy, he wanted to protect the island. It wasn't about sacredness. It was about he wanted to be kind of alone and left alone. They're being, because Andar and Turok are being chased by natives at the very beginning of the story, and so the Jord is basically trying to protect his little patch of area territory.
Right. Okay.
And so if he lets them go, then that could lead to other people basically showing up and causing problems, and he does not want that. And so he's like, nope, you can't cross my river, you can't have anything to do with my territory, or I will sick my essentially guard dog on you. Which leads to a very sort of tragic moment where while he tries to kill Turok with his own bow, accidentally kills his own pet and is left even more alone than he was initially. And that's kind of where that first story ends.
And forgive me, I'm realizing it now. I don't know how I made this mistake. When I said it didn't feel like Turok was the main character, I saw the a word bubble just a minute ago that confirmed this for me. I could have sworn that the one in the red was Turok.
No,
that's Andar.
I read through the entire thing thinking, man, they're really not giving much attention to Turok here. It's like the other guy's in charge at every angle.
Yeah.
Turok, I think it's kind of like the sort of mentor father figure to Andar.
Weird.
And so in some stories, he was in some stories, it is more Andar's story, because occasionally they'll be separated or whatever, and Andar's got to live by the wits or the things he's learned and that kind of stuff too. So there was some of that on there. But the reason I wanted to share this one is this is the first Turok comic that I had a chance to get my hands on. And I just love the Turok character. I love the fact that there's no need for pretension with it. He's just he's a Native American hunter who's just a badass, and like that's all he's got to be. And he's somber and he's serious and he's about taking care of business and all that kind of stuff. But he's just a badass. I'm just like, I love this guy. He's amazing. And so
he's a survivor.
He's a survivor. He's 100% a survivor, and he's living off of his wits. And he's living off of his intelligence and his skills. And I wouldn't care who the character was, but the fact that growing up in the West like I have, I've known lots of people that are that same kind of mold of every people group. But it was great to see that in a Native American character who is and where he's outside of his element, and yet his element is still giving him those tools for survival.
Now that you bring that up, it brings up an interesting point regarding diversity, which is the fact that because Turok is basically a survivor archetype and a really good one, a skilled one at that. It doesn't, as you kind of mentioned, it doesn't really matter who you are. You can the masculine side is appealing. You can identify with this character, and as you're reading it, you're like, I can imagine myself pulling bows and and killing dinosaurs. And so this character actually, I think, accomplishes way more for the cause of diversity than what we often see people trying to do when they force it.
Mm-hmm.
You just have this character being cool and interesting, and there isn't necessarily, he's not preaching at us, he's just being a really cool character. Yep. And you naturally start to identify with him, just like people from Brazil naturally identify with Goku, or people naturally have identified with Superman for decades.
One of the other things that I think is really fun about the time travel, lost in time element too, is there are a group of folks out there in the world that find depictions of Native Americans in comics especially to be problematic, because they're always described in traditional garbs, right? They have these visual keys to say, oh, this is an American Indian, or this is whatever. And with Turok, because he's a man out of time, right, and because he shows up in the Lost Lands wearing the clothes he was wearing, it end runs around all of that. So it's one of those things where, yes, he's visually representing a time and place, but that's also because he is in the narrative representing a time and place. So you don't and that's one of the things that I also find appealing about it, because it I feel like cuts off the knees of naysayers who want to look for an excuse to not like this really fun character. So
he's
And
well
so-
portrayed too. I gotta admit, like the writers did a good job. They didn't try to like have him go
Mhm.
how, like I mean they weren't leaning in too much into those cliches. They
In
were
fact,
just
I
like,
found it kind of interesting how we're hearing them in our language, but then they are having to deal with these cave people who are far less articulate.
Mhm.
Now that did make both stories in this almost unbearable to read, because the amount of that inarticulateness and how they wrote it. Oh, by the time I got to the end, I was like, oh, I can't take this anymore. But it was very nice every time I got to hear one of the two main characters speak instead.
Yeah, it's
But
what they talked about in Red Letter Media when they were doing talk about the Next Generation, Star Trek: The Next Generation, how the universal translator is just something that we accept, so that every episode is not like Temba with his arms wide and trying to, because that's what every episode would be if not for the universal translator. And it's like you either have a story like this where you're trying to have people who don't speak the same language, and that's just agonizing on the page, or you just bite the bullet and say, okay, they can talk,
Yeah.
They can communicate with each other.
So here is a question that says, where did the cave people come from? The Flintstones universe? No, they
Flintstones
just
comics.
The cave way into the Lost Lands is a time portal. So they came from the past, and they're in the present, but isn't the present. And Turok is from the past and is in the present that isn't the present. It's all made up. It's pretend.
That's still not helping me though,
Just
because
run with it. It's
by
great.
the time this was being made into a video game in the 90s, suddenly we've got AK-47s and aliens.
Yes, that's a whole different thing. And so we're only going to hit one of the stories in this thing, because there's a whole other thing. There's more cave people, but we're going to go on to look at Turok Dinosaur Hunter number 16.
I need to. Did you pick this one? Did you pick this one consciously or subconsciously because it was written by Mike Barron, and we're going to talk to him soon?
No, I did not realize it was written by Mike Barron. Well, I mean, I guess I realized it was written by Mike Barron when I picked it, but that's not why I picked it.
Okay.
The reason that I picked it was because of the new Turok comics that I picked up. This was my favorite. Like, I mean, I love this flipping comic, and but the thing about it, this is that it takes some telling, because this is a little ways into Turok's relaunch story. And one of the things is that I guess, do you want to explain the whole Valiant thing on there? Because it's kind of, there's a lot of nonsense.
So Valiant Jim Shooter. So I think some of it comes from like Secret Wars and stuff, but but I know it definitely comes from New Universe and stuff like that. So Jim Shooter wanted to basically create a kind of take the Marvel idea of a shared universe, and he wanted to go even further. He wanted to make a shared universe that was so shared that like every comic, he basically created a sort of MCU effect, but he was going to like double down on its continuity. In some ways, you could say it's kind of what Eric July is trying to do with Rippaverse, the attempt at least, which is to create this completely cohesively put together universe where every comic is informing and is informed by another moment in this sort of mosaic.
Which is exactly what we have been doing for 20 years.
And
you can
I
read a bunch of it on Global Comics.
And I know, and like I said, Rhys, I could see why you'd be such a fan of that approach. But the plus side of it is that people who got invested into Valiant, and this is something that the more I read, the more I understand. Because when I first picked up Valiant Comics, I was like, there's something like the artwork didn't really appeal to me, and I was like, how did this attract the passionate fan base that it did? But when you start getting into it and you start seeing that the writers and creatives were putting together, everything was connecting to everything. it was like, oh, I could see why. Because when you got hooked on this thing, everything connected. And so they had some big crossover events, one of which I think basically broke not only their company, but helped break the comic book bubble as a whole, Deathmate, which they did with Image.
Part of
But
that had to do with Image, though. If you really
for
want
sure,
to
no, I'm not blaming Valiant. I'm just saying that
mean,
they were
Image came out of that thing like roses somehow, but Image destroyed Valiant because those bastards never did anything on time,
right, exactly.
and everything that Shooter was doing depended on getting it done on time. So Mark Silvestri, it's your fault.
So part of what we see here. That's fair. That's fair. I mean, like I said, I mourn when it's like, wow, reading, because I discovered Valiant much later, and I was like, there's some legit stuff here in the old Valiant. And so one thing that Jim Shooter did, in addition to creating, spearheading at least the original characters that Valiant has, things like Ninjak and Exo Man of War, Harbinger, things of that nature, Rye. He also was able to get licenses for things like from Gold Key, such as Turok and Solar
Magnus
Man,
Robot Hunter.
Yeah, Magnus Robot Fighter and Solar Man and the Atom. And so he then kind of wrapped them all up, recontextualized these mostly forgotten characters. And I would say that it's probably Valiant is probably why these IPs still exist. Because they had been forgotten, and Shooter brought them and made them relevant again. And then afterwards, Acclaim was able to make some video games. That's why Turok and Shadow Man are still properties.
Speaking of Shadow Man, total side note, but I was also able to pick up the issue of Shadow Man this last trip where he visits Carhenge, just an hour north from me. Oh yeah.
Piscoso. Obviously, I forgot Bloodshot.
Yep.
Definitely. So Turok coming. This version of Turok has basically been recontextualized, rebooted, retconned to fit into the Valiant universe, which is supposed to be very, very cohesively put together.
Right, and there were, I believe, these were the two big changes they made to Turok. One, instead of being a pre-Columbian Indian, he was from the 1840s. So his people were Kiowa. And they had barely had any interactions with Anglo society or Franco society, and then he finds the secret to the hole into the Lost Lands, and he's trapped there for who knows how long.
And time doesn't pass there, so they're not only like the land that time forgot, but it's like the land where time doesn't pass.
Yeah,
and so that allows.
At least not in the same way.
So we can now have like Turok being in this pocket place. And then he can also cross over, need be, with Valiant other characters.
So then they had their big event where where they started like merging, like there was some sort of space god person, mother god thing, who was then wanting to like rewrite all of time to suit her.
She's Solar's. That all comes. She's Solar's ex-girlfriend.
Right. In any case, Turok was given the ability to understand all languages, which is pretty handy, and then was given an upgrade in his weapons information, and was given a flash course in human history, and then dumped into like 1987. So
was there a hint? Because I know the Geomancer is like a big thing. Was there a hint that he's also one of the Geomancers or something?
I'm not sure. I haven't read enough Turok. I love Turok, but Turok is like my favorite, like third tier character.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
That makes sense, right? So the Turok is the kind of thing like if I'm flipping through a dollar bin and there's a Turok comic, I buy it.
So, no, there you go. Yeah.
but I don't look to fill the gaps in my collection in. It's just one of those things where it's like
there was that little hint because I've not read Turok's not series. I'm gonna add it to my list, but I do know that like. There are certain characters that like can speak with the earth. That's a big important thing in the Valiant universe. And it's almost like a mantle that kind of gets passed down. So like
there might be something like that.
He mentions like, oh, the earth is like talking to me, and I was like, right. Oh, is he planting the seeds for that?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it's because he's a geomancer or if it's because of being a practitioner of his native religion.
Okay. Yeah. Either could work.
Either one on those. But anyway, like I said, this one I absolutely loved, and part of it was because this happened after the initial like 5 or 6 issues of the comic very much tie into their first big crossover story. So there are lots of loose ends they're tying up from the big crossover. And so there's lots of like, well, if you haven't read the whatever name of the thingy is, I forget, that you might not pick up on what's going on. And this one, even though it is part of another event, it still seemed like a pretty contained story, and I really, really dug on it. So, so the story starts, and Turok, and you'll notice this is a little bit different. It's happening in 1993, in Texas, and there's
Unity. It's called Unity. Sorry, I'm
Unity
just
story.
blanking.
Oh, the original one, yeah.
The big crossover is the Unity thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So these guys that are smuggling stuff across the Mexican border, and then they're attacked by a dinosaur, which is just amazing. Because what kind of a world you live in where you're just going about your criminal activity, and then all of a sudden a dinosaur just eats you?
Well, not just a dinosaur, right? Because these are we get to add in the additional layer of like cybernetic dinosaurs. So this is not just your mother's survival dinosaur comic.
Right. And there's 2 classes of cyber dinosaur in Turok. There are the super intelligent ones, and there are the less intelligent ones. And in this story, they are the less intelligent ones. So you're kind of just dinosaurs. But
but I like it as a nice twist on the dinosaur fighter. Like what Hutch was mentioning earlier, the dinosaur war comics where you're just fighting dinosaurs was just like the reason you were there. This was a kind of an update to that concept, which I think is interesting.
Right. So, meanwhile, Turok's got a vision of something happening, and so he's going to go to investigate it. And then there's this weird lady, spirit of the earth thingy. We're going to skip past that.
Whoa, hold on. That's Master Dark's twin sister. I think it's his sister.
Okay.
And,
But
okay, all right.
That's part of the overall event that I don't understand and I don't care about because it's just fine. Because
to me, I thought she just looked like some like old,
Master Dark is a cool looking character.
I'm not saying that it's not cool and you shouldn't go read the whole rest of the chaos.
Okay, all right.
That's not the part of the story that I love.
All right.
No, but I do want to point out though that when he first said the spirit of the earth, I just took that as the comic giving it to me, and I assumed he was right, and so I was like, whoa, wait a minute. The Indian spirit of the earth is a white lady? Oh, people are not going to like that.
No, that is not what is actually going on, though. She's
right, and then it's like, oh, okay, never mind.
She's just a kind of spirity, magical.
And then the exact nature of her whole like whatever is in question through the whole story. So that's the other reason is like it's not a definitive part of what's going on. So it's just sort of like it's part of this other stuff. So
the only thing I would mention is that she is the part of the story where that happens is Mike is basically doing the ties to the continuity, like that. Like her role in the story is basically to do, and this would happen a lot in Valiant, where it's like there'd be like a scene and it's like establishing where this particular book fits in within the continuity and the mythos. So it's not necessary to our dinosaur conversation. If you're a Valiant lover, that scene would be like, oh yeah, this is how it connects to everything.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've picked up from the few Valiant comics I've read too is when anybody says "what a vision," that's something that ties into other things that are going on.
Oh, really? Because I only knew it from this one comic.
So that's a little nod to go read your other Valiant comics and find out what's happening. So
interesting.
So they go to this town hall, and there's just all this to do going on, and they're trying to find somebody to deal with these lizards that are out there, and
dinosaurs.
These giant lizards, and then they're we pay taxes a lot of and they hire this hunter, the snake, what does he call himself, the Sidewinder, Mr. Sidewinder, to go hunt down the lizards that are tormenting all of the cattle and the families and the children in this little Texas town. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is like such great. I love Westerns. This is like got such Western vibes, and it's got dinosaurs. Awesome. I'm already loving it. It's got it's got Turok's whole thing, and then it's got this other guy, and what's his deal?
I love the
And,
shading on that. I love the shading on that panel.
I love.
I'm not always the biggest fan of the artwork in Valiant Comics, but like that's some nice shading.
Evocative.
Very.
So then we're back to Turok, who's trying to hunt down this whole thing, and he sees this skull that's been set up as a distraction, and he kills this snake that's hiding inside the skull, and it sends him into a vision of the past. Right, 1860 and he has this whole story where there's these renegades that have gone on to terrorize these settlers, and Turok's like, that's not cool, and so there's this big fight.
Can we pause right there? Sorry, can we pause right there? I love that panel. If you scroll just a little bit down. Sorry. It's when right there, when he uses the tomahawk in shadow. And this is a wonderful way of basically alluding more to violence than and the fact that you're just this sort of shadow and your imagination. That's a very well constructed panel. I just, that one stood out to me. I really, really liked it. Sorry, I didn't mean to
do have one thing I want to hit. Fizz in the chat, I missed this earlier. Are the super intelligent dinosaurs super villains? I'd say they're normal villains. If that makes any sense. The enhancements don't make them most enhanced dinosaurs don't seem to be that much smarter than people. So take that for what it's worth. A couple of them, like Monarch, who he kills in the first couple pages, they can speak and they're super intelligent. But these ones, they seem to be about as intelligent as regular villains. So but they're also dinosaurs, so they're stronger and faster than you know, but not necessarily smarter. I don't know. Maybe they are smarter than you. Anyway,
well, if it's in Jurassic Park,
what is your favorite part of this comic?
My favorite part of this comic is well, first of all, I do want to talk about the tomahawk thing. Just one quick thing that I want to get onto it, and then we'll get on past that. Is that I also love like tomahawks as an artifact. Because as we recognize what a tomahawk looks like, is that's like a marriage of two technologies of European and Native American industry to create this super effective hand weapon, and I love that. But anyway, basically the thing in the past is Turok has fought this guy who calls himself Snake Handler in the distant past before he went into the Lost Lands. And Snake Handler is some sort of snake shaman, and he curses Turok that he will find him again, right? And then Turok ends up in the fighting off these dinosaurs, and he barely escapes the dinosaurs, and then he's all beat up. And this is probably my favorite part. He's just beat to heck, and then who should show up, right? Scrolling down here. But it's the Sidewinder, who turns out to be the reincarnation of this snake handler guy, and they have this moment between them where it looks like Turok's like beaten, and they set up this conflict between them in a way that like accentuates the story that's going on. You got this flashback that's not directly germane to the story, but it also sets up this conflict between them, and that's the part that I just was like really invested in. And like, you know, I want to see like these guys head off again. And spoiler alert, Turok survives a snake bite. But I
love how he survives it too.
He survives in a great way. I'm not going to spoil it here. But it's really cool. And it sets up like something in the future that I'm looking forward to learning more about next time I find more Turok in the dollar bin. And so that was really neat. So like my favorite thing was tying the past, the future together in a way that accentuates the story that's going on, but isn't actually part of that story.
I also like that he has to outsmart the dinosaur. It's not just him just like killing it because he's just amazing.
Yeah.
He actually has to like use his head and trick.
Well, and he suffers. He suffers killing it. Right. He's gone up against this guy, and he gets just jacked up. Let's go back to this page here. Well,
yeah,
not this one.
He's pretty messed up.
He's just messed up, right? The first dinosaur.
Yeah.
And that's just like he has to lean on his craftiness because the first dino really took it out of him. anyway, that was real. That was my favorite part of this one, and there you have it. There you go. It was such a fun story. So
Oh,
there you
my-
go.
Yeah, Mike Baron did a good job. Yeah, good job on that. Tight.
I do
tight
need to say it felt like a little bit of a cop out right at the very end with him basically getting out of the snake bite just because all of a sudden you're immune to snake bites.
Well, it's not really all of a sudden, but
It's even it's like he's just too stubborn to die. Is really the is really the secret there.
I just felt like this moment of like, oh, I can stand up.
so anyhow, so that was my favorite Dino character, really.
Yeah,
But this comic was super
good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
So-
Well, we are burning through time, so let me
Oh my God, yes.
let me take it home. Let me take it home with let me pull it up. Alrighty, so and here we go. Dinosaurs for Hire by Tom Mason. This comic is amazing, in my opinion. It is my choice for favorites dinosaur comic. I just wanted to talk
The
about
reason we're having this stream, mind you.
Yeah, that's
Partly.
true. But one of the things I want to point out is nobody's favorite dinosaur comic was from any of the big two.
Yeah,
Not even Image makes the list.
That's an excellent point.
That's really interesting, I think.
that often happens, I think, with
Well,
these
I mean-
nights, though.
I mean, and granted, Turok's original a thing that was like a division of Dell, so they were like the powerhouse, just barely prior to Turok.
But when we think about the two big two, we think about two very specific universes
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, right. Definitely not either of those.
But
all right, so I love this comic, and there's something that's so of its time.
you have no idea, dude.
A lot of it is of its time.
Yeah, exactly. The entire thing is of its time, and that's why I love it so much. This comic is an artifact. It's like you had to be there when comics were at their peak in the night, at a peak. Their last peak, I guess. I'm not, because I understand like their biggest peak was probably the golden age, but like they hit a type of peak in the 90s where they traded on so much cultural capital. The time when people would say, "Oh, they're making a comic of that," you finally arrived. You know what I mean? And like that kind of moment, and it was like I think one of the last moments that comics enjoyed, print comics at least, enjoyed that level of clout in pop culture to an extent, while also still being trash for kids. So like it was that weird paradox kind of a thing. And so in that particular, the speculator market's going up a bunch. I think it's in that particular moment that you get a comic like this. And we'll just jump to the first page because the first page just says so much. Dinosaurs for Hire. I have to read this page, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit.
Did I read the wrong issue?
No, you might have. I said number 1. I even gave the year for it.
And I found what said number 1.
Did you read the black and white number 1, maybe?
No.
Oh,
Okay, so
It's
Stan Lee,
Malibu.
this is Malibu. So it starts off top left. Stan Lee can't present. Instantly starting in with the in jokes. So like again, if you read
And the
comics,
burns,
like
too.
you
Oh
get
my
these.
gosh.
So the
Yeah.
second word balloon. For licensing information, call 818-889-9800. We're tan, rested, and ready, dinosaurs. For here in 93. We're back and not a minute too soon. It's been a few years and we've got stories to tell and trademarks to protect. And you thought Ted Kennedy knew how to have a good time. What are you looking at?
Oh my god.
What are you looking at, pal? These girls are taken. Get your own and turn the page. Hey, watch it. That caption tickles. Hee hee. You won't find a shot like this in any Marvel comic, kids.
and it's got the pointing fingers from the old Flash comics,
Yeah.
but it's touching her butt.
It is in fact touching her butt. This is in fact happening.
Jeez.
So this
Well,
comic
the
just
dinosaur faces would look pretty old, Escape Cloud, because they're dinosaurs.
our
feel like,
viewership either just plummeted or doubled.
so this comic is like a shotgun to the face. And I
That's one
absolutely
way to describe it.
I absolutely love it. Okay. It was the
I
best.
also want to take the time to point out that despite because somebody, if they pick this up, they're going to figure it out. The Stegosaurus is in fact named Rhys.
It is up. Yep.
I'm not endorsing the Stegosaurus.
So in the first sequence, which is just so they can make a bunch of jokes, let's
Bungee
see.
jumping, which is ridiculously 93. So
All of this. This is fun, all right, but I hope Tom introduces the villain soon. I know the suspense is killing me, so they're just, breaking, all of the immersion, essentially. Very meta. Not talking necessarily directly to the readers, but otherwise, disrespecting the fourth wall. I want to cover, there's even some just, not just quirky writing. There's some really funny visuals as well. The first sequence involves the Stegosaurus Rhys bungee jumping and accidentally plummeting all the way to China, which is why everything is upside down, which is all just a giant setup so that he can, of course, you look up at all the girls' skirts.
Yeah, this is definitely not the issue I read.
So that is just
this is so much worse.
That's just the setup there for them to start introducing some of the side characters and antagonists that we're going to face. So we have of course we have to introduce a gun wielding psychopath
who is an agent of the IRS. So that's appropriate.
Who is Steven Seagal?
Oh, that's right.
He's Steven Seagal. I mean, it's very obvious, especially in later panels where you see him.
I hadn't picked up on that. But
He's Steven Seagal role playing as the Punisher, working for the IRS, which is just the funniest type of it. Just, and I have to get to this point here,
and that, ladies and gentlemen, is this comic.
Yeah,
so that is what's going on here.
All right, here we go. Here's where we start breaking that fourth wall a bit. I turn and walk away, dispensing my hard-earned wisdom in a mere 6-word balloons. File early, pay your taxes, itemize properly, buy bonds, read more comic books. Good day, citizen. Goodbye. Wow, my hero. Thank God for the Reagan legacy. Nice buns, too. Don't go away. We'll be right back with the Democratic rebuttal.
Yeah, because they were bashing on the Reagan legacy earlier. So yeah.
Well. And so here's.
I'm not sure what they're saying with these characters, but that guy's like the villain, right? So,
well, I'm not sure that there is a villain. I'm not sure there's a story.
There's like 5 villains, but it never really gets a story going.
There's some things that happen, but I'm not sure they have anything to do with each other.
See, here's the thing. Again,
he alludes to that. He says, "Wait till here we go. We're saving that for issue 3." He puts it in the margins here at the bottom.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that I read an entirely different issue, and yet I found myself thinking the exact same thing. So there is a pattern going on here with this comic.
Well, it must be the nature of Tom's sense of humor, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right. He does, however.
Tom thinks are funny.
This is a comic but it's a comic for comic book lovers. This page right here, Hutch, do you want to talk about what this page talks about?
Oh yeah,
the scam that this guy runs.
Yeah, this guy buys too many comics and then he rips off the covers and sells them back for the full credit, and then he sells the comics on to be sold at flea market and splits the. Yeah, this was something that did happen. From time to time, people would they'd return them for full credit. It was to keep them from having to ship all the comics back, and so they would just send the covers back. But then there would be all these piles of coverless comics being sold at flea markets. So lots of people have comics that way back in the 70s and 80s.
So this is one of the things that I love about this comic so much isn't just the fact that it's got dinosaurs, but it is a comic book made. Half of the joke over a lot of the jokes that are made in this comic are specifically made for people who read comics and knew comics, and I didn't just know characters in comics. They knew stuff like what Hutch was talking about. They knew the industry. They'd gone to newsstands. They had gone to comic book, places where comic books had been sold. They'd seen the coverless comics. They knew the scams that were being run. They knew the over the counter deals, the under the counter deals, and there's a whole bunch of jokes are made at the expense of Marvel and DC. They're like, Rhys is plummeting off that balloon faster than DC's market share. Like so many jabs at so many jabs at both Marvel and DC, all to celebrate independent publishing, and that heart is just, I love it so much.
And the irony of that, right? Like, because what would happen to Malibu later this same year was, if you don't know, those of you guys who are out there in the world, if you are younger than dirt, I'll tell you, Malibu was purchased by Marvel. Now, one of the things about this comic, they make a big deal about, their new computer coloring technology, and you can't get this in a big 2 book because we have the edge on this new technology, and because we're small press and we're nimble, we can get around the Dinosaur system with our Dinosaur comic. How ironic is that? But Marvel bought out Malibu for a not insignificant amount of money, but it wasn't a lot of money. It bought them lock, stock, and barrel so they could hire on the people that knew how to do that coloring, and they shuttered Malibu after like one event. They had a contract with Image to do Image's first run of books. Marvel took over that contract for like a year, and they kept Malibu in publication for like a year and a half, something like that. I might have the dates wrong, but it wasn't long. And then they just shuttered it all. And like that was it, man.
So, while it lasted,
I'm sorry, what is happening on the next page where the guy turns this dude into pellets? Is that a joke? Is that some joke that I don't get?
I think this is a villain. I think we're setting up for later. And
okay. I didn't know why. What's the significance of him turning into yellow dots? Or is it?
I think that's just his weapon. I think he shows up he might show up in a future issue.
Oh, okay.
I might as well show you what I was reading then.
Well, let me. I got more to show.
No, but it'll help to answer some of these questions.
Donald Trump.
There is a Donald Trump reference.
There's a Donald Trump reference, but is that him in the panel up above where he's saying it says "elect me" and please look at the hair? Who is that supposed to be?
So a lot of these people are so I know the top. Some of them I recognize. We have Elvis. Duh. I know the top middle is Roger and Ebert.
Yep, Siskel and Ebert. Yep.
Sorry, Siskel and Ebert, right? And
George W. Bush, Sr. George H.W. Bush.
Oh, that's right. Okay. That I think that's Pamela Anderson. Probably. In the centerfold girl, I think that's Pamela Anderson. So some of these characters were like, you just, again, this is if you were a kid at the time, like all these pop culture references, like you'd immediately know who all these people were. So I'm assuming that someone who was, a politician at the time. I don't think it's Trump. Because
somebody who was running at the time.
Is it Gary Hart, maybe? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Then it with the hair, the red hair, I just that's probably not the way he looked back then either. But yeah, I know there is a reference to Trump later. I didn't know who that was, and I was trying to figure it out.
Radical, man. I can't wait for the new Sega Genesis game, which did in fact get released. And if I were smart,
is that Seth Green? It kind of looks like Seth Green.
I don't know.
Well, Seth Green wasn't that old then.
I don't know. He was in the Power Glove ad or something like that for
that's right.
Nintendo.
That's
so
right.
I don't know.
Then it might be.
Could be Seth Green
because there's the Sega Genesis reference, which they did in fact make the Sega Genesis game.
Yeah.
So, that means that of the comics we've 3 of the 4 comics properties that we have reviewed tonight were video games.
True. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, only Calvin and Hobbes escaped that fate. But okay, let me find. There was something else in here that I wanted to touch on. Here.
Gone was actually 2 video games, by the way. There was actually a side scroller, but it was for Japan only, so you wouldn't have known that. I just read that as you had me look it up. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
All right, so I love some of the fourth wall breaking. Hey, check this out. Photographs, and they're tilted. Making fun of their own kind of like, comic book decisions.
They make a lot of commentary on both comics and film industry.
I love every second of this. And they even did a nice little bit, because one of the things, because they show the dinosaurs kind of like romancing the women, and then they show later that like most of these women are like, they're just androids, they're just robots. So and then he said, gotcha, it was a dream. Wow, what a dream sequence. Let's see Peter David top that. Those rounded panel borders really did the trick, distinguishing fantasy from reality. And of course, like they specifically made a lot of those panel borders rounded, and of course, drawing all attention to, just everything in the comic. There's a bunch of jokes about MASH. When they find out the basic gist is that the dinosaurs for hire are living large, but they're broke. And they're so broke. They are so broke that, where is it? Here we go. They are so broke that Donald Trump is starting to sell off his back issue collection for Dinosaurs for Hire. That is how broke the Dinosaurs for Hire are. That's the crux of this issue, and it's a setup for the rest of the series that the Dinosaurs for Hire are going to have to actually go and get hired for jobs so that they can, in fact, keep up their profligate lifestyle.
I love that their butler is McLean Stevenson, who can't get work anywhere else. From MASH, which is why you said they make the joke about MASH. Yeah.
They make jokes about a MASH reunion, and he's crying, and so it's just this perfect storm of pop culture references, 90s violence, sleaze, and there's our Punisher character, and of course, as opposed to a skull, he's got a giant dollar sign as he's shaking this guy for $2.35, because that's, if you owe the IRS, I'm going to collect every single red cent. And unfortunately, the Dinosaurs for Hire owe $2 million in back taxes, so this guy is clearly going to be coming for them. So it's more of a bunch of setups and story hooks in this initial adventure than a cohesive story, but I didn't care because it's what a ride.
It's everything Twitless loves about comics.
you gotta show the next page. Look at the face. That is clearly supposed to be Steven Seagal. I mean,
no, that's right. No, you're right.
That is.
It's both. He's both. It's Steven Seagal as the Punisher, as an IRS agent. Yeah, it's all of them.
Which is hilarious.
which is down. Which
how could he be more of an a-hole? He works for the IRS.
We love your work, Steven.
All right, that's Dinosaurs for Hire. I absolutely love this comic, and it even ends with they make a bunch of jokes, because at the time, Dinosaurs for Hire was being considered, it was optioned for a television show,
which I don't understand. Like,
well, that
would have been like The Mask.
That's what this after comic is. This after comic is literally them. They're doing pitches, and they're like, okay, how do we take Dinosaurs for Hire and make it into a cartoon? What if we do Dinosaur Baby? And this is them all as babies, and they fight a reanimated cat, but because they all pull out their guns at the end, the pitch doesn't work. And Mason actually talks. The show didn't work partly because they wanted to take Dinosaurs for Hire. This is around Jurassic Park, right? So they're just like, get something with dinosaurs on it. Hey, Malibu, you got a dinosaur thing. Let's make it into a TV show. But of course, his product is made for clearly a pubescent audience. And they wanted something for kids. And so it never made it out of development. But that's commented on in the actual comic, which is also kind of fun. Tom Mason went on to he did an interview recently with Silverline 6 months ago, which I do recommend seeing. And Tom discusses how he went on to work in television. He's worked on things like Malcolm in the Middle, bunch of Canadian television shows you've never heard of, and some. So he works in Hollywood essentially, which I think is a tragic loss. I think that I would love to I wish he could just make more Dinosaur for Hire. That would just make me happy. So.
So that's been fun. From the chat, Ethereal Dragon says, any Kazar fans? Yes, but it's just not my favorite dinosaur comic. Kazar's great.
I've never read Kazar.
He used to share. He used to share a back when they would do the sort of like two characters sharing a comic, like you had like Captain America and Giant
Marvel
Man.
2-in-1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 2-in-1s. Kazar. The reason that sticks in my mind is Kazar was who they paired with Doctor Doom when they gave Doctor Doom a series, if I recall correctly. So the 2-in-1 was them.
Yeah.
So
no, I like Kazar. Okay. It's very much in the same vein as Tarzan, but it's in the Savage Land with dinosaurs and stuff. It's fun, but it's just not my favorite. Turok is my favorite.
It's a good pick.
So Twitless, have you ever read Marvel?
Marvel?
No,
Marville, the village.
Marville.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
I have a feeling you'd actually like it.
I mean, here's the thing. This was an amazing night. I loved everything. Everything we did today was bangers. I have read Gone before. I've assigned it in class. It's an amazing comic. I love Calvin and Hobbes. Turok is good. I love Valiant. Like I love everything on everything that we had on our panel.
Good.
It is. It's all good. It's all good stuff. Like I love our entire panel of comics. There's it's been, I think, nothing but home runs of books. This is one of probably I was thinking this before we started. This has been, at least for me, one of my favorite shows we've done. Everything we did, every comic here was just amazing.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Don't get me wrong. Knowing your love of milk and cheese, I understood why you would like something like this. But so much more, I felt like this was being written by Bill Jemas the whole time.
So I'm curious, Cartoonicus, which one do you have there?
Well, so to answer your question, this guy, from earlier, this guy has been killing people all kinds of crazy, gruesome ways the whole time. He never does the same thing twice. This one was all about them. Let me zip back up to well, no, it wasn't all about them. It jumped around from plot point to plot
What is it?
point.
What number is
This
it?
was
Apparently, I read 2, despite very,
you read 2.
very specifically clicking.
Dale Keown did the cover for issue 3. Tom knew Dale, and the cover for issue 3 is magnifico.
It's so good. It's so good. It's got to be in another language.
It is.
Anyway, this one was all about them
Jurassic
making a
Park.
movie. And their whole deal, very tongue-in-cheek, was we're back, now that we're making a movie, which was the same thing as saying, well, the comic is also back, right?
Yeah.
And they spend the first third of it basically just making that same joke for the most part.
But they have dinosaurs with
Beginning.
guns. That's the coolest thing ever.
Oh, and they also say, 4 pages in and we've already got an action scene.
Yes. This is why I read
like I said,
comics.
they break the fourth wall all the time.
Like 13-year-old is just like bubbling.
The Stegosaurus has a rocket launcher.
There was one joke I found funny, and that's the fact that they blow up the entire store trying to defend it, and then they have this, cool guys don't look at explosions moment.
That is a great panel, though.
Read that at the bottom left. Man, what a rush! You guys really know how to party. I was right to pick an alternative comic. I love how independent this is.
Every joke is so in your face.
I love it.
It is. But man, this jumped around from plot point to plot point
It threw in characters. I had no idea why they were even there.
Some of this is like they're doing a sort of like they're referencing like Malibu stuff. So again, if you were reading a bunch of Malibu, I think
Is that
some of
the
these
case?
stuff, I think some of that you'd recognize some of these.
Well, and
It was the most exhausting comic I ever read.
so I also felt quite exhausted by reading issue 1. But I do want to take one time to talk about the IRS agent's belt.
I did just figure it out what I'm looking at there.
That's a change maker. I hadn't put that together before this.
Also,
moment.
I didn't see it before, but I think they made a skull out of the dollar sign.
Yeah, at least to make it look like that.
That's brilliant. This is brilliant stuff.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And then what else did they do? They kind of go off on so many tangents. I'm not sure why guys are dressed up as turtles.
Well, no,
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are
yes,
big
you
then.
do. You know exactly why they're dressed up as turtles because he needs to make fun of the other major reptile property that was.
But I don't
big
know
at the
who they
time.
are or why they're there or why they're interacting
Why?
with each other.
That doesn't matter.
It
doesn't matter.
Continuity.
And then they bring in this clown character
doesn't
who
matter.
I can only assume is also from another comic.
Listen. All that matters is they're dinosaurs with rocket launchers. End of story.
Yeah.
Well, no, see, that's the thing. There's dinosaurs with rocket launchers, and then 2 pages later, they're spending 3 or 4 pages talking about the politics of the comic industry and how
Yes, that's why.
comics
What's
properly.
better than rocket launchers?
I am-
The politics of the 80s and 90s comic book industry. This comic was literally just made for people who love comics. I just.
I'm sorry, I got whiplash every other page for what was happening. in this.
That is a feature, not a bug.
I'm gonna say what you said for Scott Pilgrim. Clearly, this comic is not for me.
That is perfectly fair. But it is for me.
So, we got to wrap the show up. A couple things I want to address in the chat. Jim Tuner said Devil Dinosaur Moon Boy was good. Moon Girl not so much. I have not read Devil Dinosaur, so I've been told that it is worth reading, but not something I have done. And he
I know
says,
it's popular.
"Yep, he's talking about the old, like back in the days, 70s, 60s, 70s, I think." Dino Crisis 3, the one set in space, was a great comic book, even though it was actually a video game.
I didn't know they did Dino Crisis as a comic. I know they did Resident
Well,
Evil.
I don't know either, but for all I know, he could be making a meta joke about the whole thing. Since we were talking about these comics are all video games,
gosh.
maybe he's going the other way. I don't know.
Okay, what happens when we end up getting meta comics about meta comics?
That's
We
just
didn't
current,
talk
that's
about
just
that today.
that's just current day Marvel.
Yeah,
That's the Dale Keown cover.
Okay.
I
That's
can't read it. Hang on a second. I gotta blow this up.
that is a great cover.
Meet the X Mutants.
I remember this cover from my childhood. I'd never known it was Dale Keown until later. I was like, holy crap! And apparently Tom knew Dale, and they were friends or something.
The artwork totally changed up, or maybe just for the cover.
It's just the cover. It's just the cover there. Yeah.
Metal's comment, this reminds me a lot of cartoon Sheep in the Big City, which is made in the same vein toward the animation industry, but most kids didn't get the stuff and it ended after one season. I actually love Sheep in the Big City, and I love that it wasn't, it was very meta commentary, but it was also
I only
so
got to see the
satirical.
first episode of that, and I would love to find the rest.
The satire in it was so sharp and even-handed. I really enjoyed it.
See, I actually liked that.
Is that
But-
the cartoon? Is that the Cartoon Network one?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
All right.
But
It was basically Rocky and Bullwinkle in modern day.
yeah, it was. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It was very much Rocky and Bullwinkle. But no, we did not discuss Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which is excellent, but not my favorite.
So
I do love that the audience is getting to put in their favorites as well.
no, excellent. That's another reason to do these shows because people get to mention their favorites as well.
Which
Oh,
also had a video game.
It did. I remember that.
That's
Yeah.
right, and a cartoon. That's actually my exposure to Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was from the cartoon first, not the.
I mean, if we go down the road of dinosaurs and cartoons, we will be here all night. That's,
No, we gotta cut it.
infinitely.
So
Dinobots.
well, closing thing I want to go ahead and point out is if you if you follow us on Webtoon of Ideal Comics, tomorrow morning we are dropping a little story I did with Evie, with Joy Waller, called Joe Jobs Meet Cute. It is already available on Global Comics. It is a 5-page slice of life romance story featuring an old Greg from Force of Good and Evil, grown up and depressing. But it is a great little story. I absolutely love it. Joy's art matches the tone of our little. It was an experiment to do a 3-page drama comic, and it ended up I failed miserably, and it's 5 pages long. But we really hit it. I really think it's great, and you go check it out. It's going to be on Webtoon starting tomorrow. But it's on Global Comics today.
Yeah, I was gonna say metal was right on my wavelength. So you're an old Greg, not the old Greg.
I don't know what that is.
Don't. It's fine.
Okay. Greg from Force of Good and Evil.
Gotcha.
As an adult.
Ever drink Bailey's from a shoe?
No.
Never. Metal just chuckled.
The devil in the pale moonlight. What?
Nothing.
So anyway, that's that story. I feel like I should say something else, but I can't think of what it was.
Keep reading.
Yeah, get out there.
Dinosaur comics if you can stomach this last one.
Yeah. We have so many great. We had so many great suggestions from the chat. We may have to fish out some of those and do another Dino comic night.
Yeah.
So, but I still don't think you're gonna unseat.
Well, then I have to bring out Dinosaur D-Day in depth, and
There you go.
That'll be the one.
Yeah,
that'll be the one. Okay, guys.
This show's gonna have a sequel to it.
Yay.
It might. Anyway, we will call that today. Tune in next week. I don't know what we're doing next week. It might be Superman. I'm not sure. Actually, there might not be a show next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to be in Lincoln, so
okay.
I'm in Lincoln at a training. I'm not sure that I will be back in my be available actually. So, but yeah,
let us know.
We got to figure it out. What's in the? We'll figure it out later. Okay, that's it. You get out there, go out there and read some comics and enjoy the best art form on the planet. Later.